In a cold stone prison in the east of France, Carine came face to face with the monster of Elm, as he was suitably dubbed. She was convinced that Van Geloven had raped and killed many other children, and that it was likely that several were killed whilst he was working in the United States over a period of 18 months. The first interview with Van Geloven went very well, and they both talked for hours. Carine describes him as a very nice and charming man. The next interview was starkly different. Carine's initial reaction upon Van Geloven being brought into the cell was shock. Surely the guards had delivered the wrong prisoner. His eyes had become entirely black. His mannerisms were highly aggressive. He was a completely different man to the day before. There was no way for Carine to engage with the individual because, as she looked into its eyes, she found no connection. She forced herself to show no emotion despite the onslaught of verbal attack, and intuitively felt that she was also being subjected to some form of spiritual attack. As the attack intensified, Van Geloven grabbed Carine's hand and began to squeeze it. Despite the pain, she showed no emotion and slowly brought her other hand over the top of his. The warmth and care of that touch caused Van Geloven to shake and tremble, and over several moments she saw him return to himself. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald. This is the Talamanca Review. It's 10:22 p.m. on Thursday, the 9th of May. And we're going to continue with the human devil. Now, this material is always very hard for me. The Belial chapter in The Light of Darkness, for those of you who've read it, was extremely difficult to write. Extremely difficult. The human devil and my interactions with Carine Hostebat, who you just heard a part of the book there from the human devil chapter. And that's the moment that Carine realized that there was a spiritual dimension to this. It wasn't all just psychological. That she met the same guy 2 different days and same body showed up. But whatever was in that body was different. And his eyes went black. And you hear that in occult circles, don't you? For those of you who are occult literate, this phenomenon of the eyes going black. So it's the thesis of the light of darkness, and in many ways the devil in us, that we are run by a death cult. A death cult that commiserates with dark entities. You can call them demons if you want. I call it a satanic cult at times, but that's only because that's the language we use. That's the language people understand. The truth is, this is all extraterrestrial. Dark extraterrestrials and light extraterrestrials. I know that's difficult for a lot of people to understand. I know a lot of people with very strong Christian beliefs are going to push back on what I'm saying. There's all these pastors on the internet now attacking the UFO movement. Tucker Carlson did the same thing, saying that this is demons. It's okay if you think that. You don't need to know all the details. Whether it's an extraterrestrial or something that rebelled against God at the beginning of creation doesn't make a huge difference when you understand what's going on, which is that human beings commiserate with these entities, allow them into their consciousness, into their bodies, allow themselves to be co-opted, possessed, and used by these entities, that there are ritual societies on this planet that have been operating for generations. I mean, probably going back to the beginning of this period. About 6,000 years they've been around that long. Longer, probably. The African magic goes back 100,000 years. And these are just regions of creation. Okay? But the truth is, and it's important in some measure that you understand the details, and so I'm going to give my truth, and that is that these are all extraterrestrials. In your consciousness, they can take the form of what you might think is a demon in your unconscious, and you'll think a demon. But if you had the wherewithal, if you had the stamina and the spiritual strength to stand up to the entity, and you confronted it, and you were powerful enough, you would be able to remove the mask and see what it is. And it's always an extraterrestrial. Okay? Always an extraterrestrial. Cliff High is talking about this a lot now too. If you're following his podcasts, he's on this epic rant about what he calls the worshippers of the Elohim, which are that special group of people I sometimes mention who are fighting for an expanded Israel and the gas and oil that's just off the shore of Gaza. How big is this? How much of our institutions have been taken over by this ideology? How many people are conscious of it who may be participating in it? These are all valid questions. I had them myself. I fought these ideas. I did not want to accept them. I started to get them first spiritually, inwardly. And then I started to get things put in front of me in my timeline, as though I had been selected to talk about these things. I know, David Icke's out there, there's a bunch of people out there, but it needs to be repeated, right? Just because the Beatles cut an album doesn't mean nobody else can cut a pop music album. And just because David Icke is out there, and he doesn't get everything right either, and he's not that spiritually literate, he can't tie certain things together, but based on what he's been given, he's done a great job. Okay? We've been over all that material, we've been over the reptilians, we've been over everything. Okay? Now, the things I'm going to talk about tonight are not in the book, but when I do these podcasts, I sort of have the liberty to expand on what's in the book and just talk freely and liberally about these topics and present evidence to you. So, for those of you who have read The Light of Darkness and The Devil in Us, these podcasts are going to have dimensions that other people aren't going to get, because I build off of the books. So the question once again is, how pervasive is this? Well, I would say that in the West it's everywhere now. It controls every institution. And this is the reason they set up the system the way they did. This is why they created mortgages. This is why they created the fractional reserve banking system. So that once you're in the system and you're committed, you can't get out unless you're willing to risk ruin. It makes me think of that quote in the Bible, it will be as difficult for a rich man to get into heaven as it would be for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. This is the true meaning of sacrifice. The inversion of sacrifice is what we're talking about in The Human Devil. It's where you sacrifice other things and you don't make sacrifices in your own life. Anybody who's brought us the truth in any measure in the last 4 years has paid huge prices for it. There's a whole class of what I call liar whistleblowers out now. And they go about 80%, but they stop at the really demonic stuff. And they put most of the blame on somebody else. Naomi Wolf is doing it. She's got a new book out. She's Jewish. And she's blaming it all on the Nazis, and under a very powerful and still unmanifest, undeclared, underground Nazi presence in the world, financed with trillions of dollars and out-of-this-world technology that is behind all of this stuff, like the depopulation agenda and everything. And she's partially right. It's what we're living now. So this, I'll start to build on the whole book for those of you who are following the whole podcast series. And I know this isn't as entertaining as other podcasts, but I can't give you the truth and fulfill the mandate of entertaining you. And I just don't give a shit. I don't make any money from this. I'm doing this because it needs to be done. Because I've been asked to do it by my conscience, by my heart. So I do it. It would surprise Naomi Wolf quite a bit to find out that her own people are the major players in this, and that they are presently cooperatively working with the underground Nazis. Remember the 1947 chapter? This is why I say you have to really pay attention when you're listening to my material. Because this is a different kind of podcast. This is a different this is a postdoctoral thesis on what's going on in this world. You need to pay attention. You can't be multitasking. You need to sit down and listen to it. Or you're not going to get it. You're not going to get the realization. And this is what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to invoke a realization in you. Remember, you're not going to get there through calculation. When the realization comes, you'll get a shiver up your back and the hair on the back of your neck will stand up. You will be terrified because it is terrifying. But it is exactly that depth of despair that you need to go to. And then when you get to that despair and you go, oh my God, Bruce is telling the truth, then cry out for God. And God will come. Cry out for God. If you study the Christian saints, if you're a Christian, and I realize the Protestants haven't produced any saints, just the Catholic Church, and it's true, a lot of them are phonies. Mother Teresa's a phony saint. A lot of them are phonies. But there have been real saints produced in the Catholic system. St. Francis of Assisi was a saint. And I would say maybe Padre Pio, and there's a movie coming out on him, was a 20th century saint. Okay? And when the realization of God hits these people, they just leave everything. Whatever wealth they have, whatever property, and they just go and they live and they serve God as best they can. Because once you get God, there's no going back. You can't turn your back on God. You can't. Okay? So one of the things that this satanic death cult, this dark extraterrestrial intergenerational cult has done, and they did it in the 20th century, which is why The Devil in Us focuses on the 20th century. They created institutions that control our lives. And by doing that, they can maintain control over large populations with very few true dyed-in-the-wool cult initiates at the top. But they do need the cult initiates at the top or the cult associates. Okay? They need them. Can't do without them. So the case study we're going to do tonight is Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is part of a generational family that's in the cult. Read in. Rockefeller read in. Rothschild read in. Read in. Now, if my thesis is true, you would be able to examine any one of these people's lives, and you would be able to find evidence of it. And as luck would have it, evidence is coming out on Justin Trudeau now. So let's get into this. The first thing I have to do is introduce you to Canada's most prolific serial killer. who operated in Vancouver is where he got his victims. And he had a pig farm about an hour north of Vancouver in Coquitlam, British Columbia. And he would take the women there, do whatever he did with them to please himself, and then he would kill them, butcher them, and either feed them to his pigs or mix the human meat in with the pig meat and sell the human and pig meat to customers. His nickname in Canada and in serial killer circles is the pig farmer. Extremely disturbing. A pig will eat a human being, no problem. Bricktop is not lying in the movie Snatch. No problem. Pigs are often used in organized crime to dispose of bodies. Okay? Let's take a look at Pickton here. Hold on a sec, that didn't work out. One moment.
In the spring of 1999, an informant told the Vancouver police that a single mother and drug addict named Lynn Ellingson had seen a woman's body hanging in Pickton's slaughterhouse. When questioned by police, Ellingson initially denied the story, but the denial was anything but truthful. At the time, Lynn had been living and working on the farm when Pickton asked her to help him pick up a working girl. It didn't take long before they came across a woman with dark hair and high cheekbones and brought her back with them. While Pickton stayed in one room with the woman, Ellingson went to another to get high. Sometime later, Lynn woke up and noticed a light on in the barn. She walked towards the building, curious as to who would be in the slaughterhouse so late at night. She pushed open the door, and there, hanging on a meat hook, was the body of the woman they had picked up earlier that night. At eye level was the woman's legs. Lynn could not tear her eyes away from the painted red toenails. The corpse had no face, and on a table was blood and hair, black hair. Willie suddenly grabbed Lynn by the arm, pulling her behind the door. He walked her over to the table and made her look. He kept repeating, "She was a pig, so I butchered her like a pig." Lynn was terrified, sure with every fiber of her being that she was next to be hung on a meat hook, skinned and butchered like one of Willie's pigs. The man's bloodlust was insatiable. His upbringing and trauma in life had put a filter over his eyes where he saw human beings merely as livestock to be slaughtered at his discretion. And he wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. And Lynn, with her heart pounding in her chest, preparing to have a hook stuck in her as well, had no idea just how deep the darkness went and how much blood Pickton really had on his hands.
There's Robert Pickton, the most infamous serial killer that we know of in Canadian history. And by preying on prostitutes, he was able to stay undetected for years. I think he operated for like a decade and a half, maybe a decade, 10 years. Now, how many people did he kill? Well, he got charged. By the way, he's up for day parole. I'm not joking. He's up for day parole. Okay? I think he's 70 years old now. They caught him at the end of the 90s. I was actually living in Vancouver before I went to Taiwan, and I was living right by the area that he was grabbing all these women. It was called, if you know Canada, it's East Hastings Street, which is where all the heroin addicts and the whores hung out. No offense to women in the sex trades. Maybe I should be more sensitive and not use that word. But they are what they are, right? They're streetwalkers. They're low-level sex workers, okay? They're not high-end call girls. They're not working in a fancy massage parlor or anything like that. They're not feature strippers. They're just women who walk on the sidewalk and meet strangers who pull up in cars. So he operated for quite a while, okay? So let's just take a look at his confession, okay? This was obtained by an undercover police officer they put into a jail cell with him. Let's give this a listen.
What have you done? No. I thought the best way to fucking dispose of something was fucking take it in the ocean. Believe it or not, they were very no shit. That's gotta be fucking pretty good. Okay? Mm-hmm. Can't be much fucking left. Känns sloppy. Känns too sloppy. I was gonna do one more. Maybe even 50. That's what I was sloppy for. Yeah? I'm gonna do one more. Make a big battle. Make the big 5 cent. 5. That's fuck. Fuck. 5-0. Fucking half 100. Feel the syringes with antifreeze, and you inject yourself, and you're dead better than 10 minutes.
What a ghoulish man. So he never got charged for 49 murders, and he wanted to make it an even 50. Now, he's not a cult member. Okay, he's a naturally occurring serial killer, and he matches the psychological profile perfectly, as Corinne gave it to me. It's somebody who's raised in an extremely unloving and abusive environment, who has a number of traumas perpetrated upon them. Now, not everybody who has this done to them becomes a serial killer. But if you have this done to you, you're going to go through a journey in life. You're going to go through darkness. And if you come out the other end and you find light and you find God, then generally you will speak about these things, because this is a very difficult thing to become any kind of expert in, any kind of authority in. You have to go through it. The best person to catch other serial killers would be somebody who has the same inclination but doesn't indulge it. To be honest with you, I thought the TV series Dexter was absolutely brilliant. All right? I don't think for those of you who have seen the TV series, I'm not quite sure the backstory of seeing his mother murdered with a chainsaw at the age of 2 would be enough to produce the kind of psychopathy and murderous intent that he had as an adult. But so be it, right? It's just TV. If you have never seen the TV show, Dexter was a serial killer who only hunted other killers. And so he took his inclination, his uncontrollable urge to kill, based on his childhood trauma. He was raised by the police officer who found him in a storage container with like 2 or 3 inches of blood in it, where his mother had been carved up by drug dealers in Miami. She had been carved up in front of him with a chainsaw. Okay? And he was about 2.5 years old. And the police officer adopted him. That role is played by James Remar, a great actor. He was one of the goes all the way back to the Warriors movie, a Walter Hill movie from 1979. And he adopts this kid because his mother was killed, and raises him, and then starts to see the darkness at 12 or 13, starts to find animals killed and all these things. Gives him a kind of a samurai code to live by that he instills in him, and says this is the only way you're going to survive as a human being. Okay? You're not going to be able to stop the impulse to kill, but what we can do is give you a training and a discipline so you only kill the people that is beneficial to society. It's kind of a brilliant concept and the ultimate anti-hero in a lot of ways. Let's just give you another little look at the farm. Let me see here. Oh, here we go. So that was Robert Pickton, Canada's most prolific serial killer, and that's the farm where all the killing took place, about an hour north of Vancouver. Okay? So why am I telling you about Canada's most prolific serial killer when I'm talking about the Human Devil chapter from The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me? Well, the easiest way to tell you is to show you. So this is all just starting to come out now in the last few months, okay? Here we go.
Trudeau, in the early, I guess, noughts, he lived about 1.25 miles from the pig farm, and we were told that he was a regular there. We've had people that have been investigating for years now, and his roommate is a convicted pedophile, and he did 6 months in prison for pedophilia. That was it. And we got you back, Amina.
So you mentioned the pig farm, but for those that don't know what that refers to,
it's the Pickton Pig Farm, and it was a pig farm that they sold 600 odd acres that got rezoned as residential from agricultural. The Pictons made millions on that. They retained another 6.5 acres, which had a huge barn, some outbuildings, and a butchery. And Linda Pickton, David Pickton, and Willie Pickton's sister sat on the Privy Council of Canada, like the Prime Minister's office. She was a very powerful person, and she had this pig farm registered as a charity, a federally regulated charity, Piggy Palace Good Times Society. And they would have raves and concerts with the profits so-called going to the children. And of course, they were murdering mostly young Indigenous prostitutes from Vancouver's east side. And it was basically Canada's Epstein Island. And Trudeau lived just over 1 mile away with a convicted pedophile, a man who was later convicted of pedophilia. And Trudeau ended up halfway through the school year. He was a part-time drama teacher. He ended up resigning to go on a world speaking tour. And he didn't. He took another job at less pay at a nearby public school so he could stay in the same neighborhood. And Trudeau, they found that he is paid $2.25 million before the last election to a woman for a non-disclosure agreement. And he was caught with her when she was in her early teens.
So there you go. Justin Trudeau lived 1.5 kilometers from the farm. And he was known to go to events there because Pickton had an event license. And he would hold these big raves and parties. And I've heard all the stories because I know people from Vancouver. And I was told RCMP officers went there, Hells Angels went there, Canadian politicians went there, foreign politicians visiting went there. Does this sound familiar? Maybe a little bit like Comet Pizza in Washington? When you tune into this stuff and you develop the ability to see it, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's in Britain, it's in the United States, it's in Canada, it's in Australia, it's definitely in New Zealand, it's in Belgium, it's in the Netherlands. It's everywhere. This murderous cult. And a great number of the people, now again, I said Pickton was not a member of the cult, but they used him, okay, because they can do what they want to do, and when it all goes down, they flush Pickton down the toilet, and nobody, it was just a serial killer. There was no satanic or dark cult activity going on there. It's an easy, disposable human being that these people use. Now, I'm going to go over something that I covered quite extensively in the Belial chapter of The Light of Darkness, A Warrior's Tale for Our Time, which you should also read. In that novel, I cover Comet Pizza. And I particularly lay into the New York Times for the way they covered the story. And if you'll notice, immediately the media comes out and throws water on this fire. Ridicules anybody who believes it. Ridiculous conspiracy, this and that. And they focus on the one event, okay? So the one event they ridiculed was Comet Pizza. But the editors at the New York Times never take a moment to think, well, let's look deeper. If this is going on with elites in Washington, maybe it's going on elsewhere. Let's check a few countries. Let's call a few other newspapers. Let's call a few other police departments. Let's make sure we know what we're talking about before we call this ridiculous. And they never do it. They never do it in the British media when it flares up in Britain. They never do it in the Canadian media. And they don't do it in the United States media. And this is how they all work together. And they like to work with compromised people. This is why they like the twinks so much, because the deviants are easy to blackmail. This is why Anderson Cooper goes to the top of CNN. Don Lemon goes to the top of CNN. Okay, they're easy to compromise. I'll bet you that witch Rachel Maddow has shit in her closet that if it were to come out, it would shock people. She's completely controlled. She does exactly what she's told to do. For 2 years, she covered almost nothing except Trump-Russia. You would think this was the most important news story ever to come out. And it turned out to be a big nothing, and she never apologized. She didn't retract a single thing she said in the 2 years leading up to the inquiry proving that it was all a lie, and the dossier was fabricated and paid for by Hillary Clinton and her team. You live in a world where everybody at an institutional level is lying to you. Doctor, is this needle safe for me? Oh, yes. Nurse, is this needle safe for me? Oh, yes. Professor, is this education worth $28,000 a year? Absolutely. Lie to your face. Now, some of them can't take it and they get out. They have conscience. But most people, they take the money, the title, and the pension. That's all the price is these days for a soul. It's a buyer's market for the devil and his demons. It's the cheapest soul market ever for the devil. Okay? And the devil likes to do things like this, likes to bind people in contracts. But you're held to that. Remember, the devil works for God. The extraterrestrials are a different matter. And they're, in many ways, the most problematic thing on this planet now, more than the demons. Okay? And everything is extraterrestrial. We're extraterrestrial. What's the old saying? If you want to see an extraterrestrial, look in the mirror. We're all seated here. We've already been over all the material about the Palladians seeding 3 races on the planet. I think the Syrians are responsible for the African races. I think whatever that blue race is, they tutored the Indians, gave them the yogic systems, the breathing systems. The Chinese are the Ajiji, which is another extraterrestrial race. It's all extraterrestrial here. The entire planet is an experiment. Okay? The entire planet is an experiment. This is the merging of the religious and the ET narrative. They're not dichotomous, as fundamentalist believers are shouting. They are not dichotomous. They are convergent. This is what you need to understand. So Justin Trudeau was hanging around the Picton farm. Why? Why would the son of a prime minister take a job at a public school as a part-time teacher at that particular location? Why is it reported that he attended events at this farm? Is it all just a coincidence? Well, you might be able to say that. You might be able to say it's a coincidence, but here's a little bit more on Trudeau.
Hey everyone, I wanted to give some real insight as to why you see me always saying Justin Trudeau is a pedophile. So Justin Trudeau, born on December 25th, 1971, Prime Minister of Canada. So the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation uses the pedophile symbol. Now, if you don't know what the pedophile symbol is, years ago, the FBI, when investigating pedophiles, they found that many pedophiles use this symbolism. And I'm going to show you this symbolism right here. So you can look this up for yourself. Don't take anything that I say as truth. You should look it up for yourself. This symbol, as identified by the FBI, is a pedophile symbol. The Trudeau Foundation uses it as a symbol. The Clinton Foundation, who has been caught with crimes against humanity, and Bill Clinton has been charged with rape many times, and has now been, there's photos of him getting a massage from one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. So Bill Clinton is very guilty. And if you don't think that, you have a lot to learn. So that's the Clinton Foundation. Also Disney. Disney also supports and uses these pedophile symbols in a lot of their movies. So, and one of Justin Trudeau's top priorities as Prime Minister, when he became Prime Minister, was to lower the age of consent for anal sex. One of Justin Trudeau's long-term friends, Christopher Charles Ingvildson, he was 42 in 2018, he was found guilty of child pornography charges after being caught directing an international pedophile ring. 11 members internationally arrested in Canada, Australia, and the UK. Him and Justin Trudeau were friends, college roommates, both accepted to teach at West Point Grey Academy, the elite Vancouver private boarding school. And after getting the Prime Minister title, Justin Trudeau encouraged Ingvildson, the pedophile, to run for political office as a member of the Liberal Party. Another one of Justin Trudeau's friends, close friends, he was actually the founder of Street Kids International Charity, Peter Dalglish, is currently in prison in Nepal for serving a 9-year sentence for sexually assaulting 2 young boys, 12 and 14. In 2002, he became the United Nations advisor on child labor in Nepal. and now he's serving time there for assaulting the young boys there. He worked for Justin Trudeau's father when he was Prime Minister. In 1984, he was seized by images of children starving in Ethiopia. So he organized an aid shipment and accompanied it to Ethiopia. He was one of the first people in politics in Canada to go to Ethiopia and start helping starving Black children. It just is so fucking sad that it turns out the reason he was doing that was so he could sexually abuse them. And that's been proven, and he's been convicted of it. So this isn't hearsay. You can look all of this up for yourself. Another one of Justin Trudeau's good friends, Jian Ghoshi, a CBC radio host, was charged with 4 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of overcoming resistance by choking. He was actually found not guilty, and that was there's an uproar about that, I remember. What else? Oh, the CIA director Mike Pompeo was personally dispatched by Donald Trump to the Federal Democratic Republic of Nepal to oversee the capture of top United Nations advisor Peter John Dalglish, who in desperation, just prior to apprehension, released to the dark web what is described as a snuff film showing Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin cutting the face off a little girl and terrorizing her so that they could drink her blood. Again, look it up for yourself. Justin Trudeau, also another one of his friends in politics, Kathleen Wynne, the Ontario Premier. She was the driving force behind Bill 89 and a new sex education curriculum. She pioneered a new sex education curriculum that swept across Ontario that includes grade 1 education, includes multiple new words for sexual organs for 6-year-olds, as well as variable meanings of consent. Now, I don't believe that a grade 1 child should be able to consent to anything, let alone sex. So why are we teaching grade 1 children? Anyway, moving on. You can find problems with this. Maybe you don't. Again, it's just facts. This new sex ed curriculum teaches 12-year-olds to end the stigma of what contracts AIDS. So essentially, don't be too careful because AIDS is all good. Grade 3, age 8, they teach them gender identity theory, including race-based genders. So in grade 3, when your child is 8 years old in Ontario, they basically tell your kid that you might be a girl or a boy, or you might even be a Black boy, even though you're white. I'm not making this up. A convicted child pornographer wrote this material. His name was Benjamin Levin. He was the Canadian Research Chair at the Ontario Institute for Studies. He was also on the board of Ontario Education. He pled guilty for creating and possessing child pornography and counseling others to commit sexual assault. He is currently not in jail and is out on parole. Creating and possessing child pornography. That means he created child pornography and watched it. Do you know what it takes to create child pornography? You have to get a child and do terrible things to them. So he made it and distributed it and counseled others in how to do it. These are all of the people that Justin Trudeau calls his longtime friends. There's a lot more. This is all I wrote down. The man is evil, and everybody knows he's a shitty prime minister, but not everybody knows he's evil. And he has funneled so much of our money to the We Charity scandal. Go ahead and look that up. And just look at the amount of money he has given to the Clintons. For what? The Clintons have nothing to do with Canada. And in 2016, when Hillary was running for president in the United States, Justin Trudeau actually emailed John Podesta and asked him, do you need anything? How can I be of assistance? Like, how can I help brainwash the Canadian people into knowing that Donald Trump is bad, essentially? So John Podesta, WikiLeaks provided friendly emails back and forth of Trudeau offering to help the Clinton campaign. And funny enough, Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, owned Lincoln Park, Lincoln Park, where John Podesta has allegedly abusing Chester Bennington. And we all know what Chester Bennington went on to do. R.I.P. Just look this stuff up for yourself. It's absolutely insane. And happy wake up.
There you go. Okay, so now another thing that has to be examined is this duo of the Podesta brothers that became front and center in both Comet Pizza and the Madeleine McCann disappearance in Portugal. If you can go that far back, I think that was 2007. Sir Clement Freud, the great-great-grandson of Sigmund Freud, was also implicated tangentially, circumstantially, in the Madeleine McCann disappearance. He was a known pedophile. And look, if you can do, look, there is no such thing as minor attraction. There is no such thing as a minor attracted person. Okay, it is not a new sexual orientation as some organizations are trying to present it. If you start to violate children, you will go down a very dark road very quickly. And these things lead to death rituals, cannibalism, all kinds of things. Because remember, what I said yesterday, the principal characteristic of these things is that you constantly want to push the boundary and the frontier of taboo and transgression once you start on that road. It becomes its own spiritual path in a sense. It's not an authentic left-hand path. If you want to study or look at an authentic left-hand path, look at the Aghori of India, Aghori. Okay, that is an authentic left-hand path, where negative things are used for spiritual development. And this is an invalid left-hand path, okay, that leads to just the most despicable things that you could ever imagine, okay? Now, when we talk about the Podestas, let me just show you a quick picture here, okay? I don't know if you had time to read that. So Podesta had that sculpture commissioned based on a crime scene photo of one of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims. And Podesta is definitely a cult member. Now, this goes a long way to explaining what Justin Trudeau was doing at the Picton farm, doesn't it? Okay? Now, I've known this for years at an intuitive level. I figured it out about, over 10 years ago, but I never said anything out loud because there was no evidence. Very often, these complete psychopaths present very well because they're acting their whole lives. That's why so many of them are in power now. The great man of France, Macron, little more than a pedophile, a twink, and a complete deviant and pervert. It's not a normal sexual orientation, despite what the rabbis are telling us. Remember, the Judaism is the left-hand path in the West, the formal left-hand path. Okay? So they kind of find serial killers very amusing because they're naturally occurring negative types, right? And probably have profound demonic association. And where a person on the right-hand path would look, metaphorically speaking, for angelic association, people on the left-hand path are looking for demonic association, demonic tutelage, to become more powerful. And the left-hand path, as it's practiced in the West, seeks to eviscerate the heart. They think that sentiment, they think that feeling, and they think that love are weaknesses. And they want to exorcise them, annihilate them within their psyche. That's why they do it. That's the left-hand path explained. And so these people would make ideal chief executive officers of large corporations. Let's tear up the rainforest. Let's make a big hole in the ground to do the tar sands. Let's just look at what they do. Just look at what they do. Now, there's a difference between people like this and somebody like Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Kim Jong-un, to the best of my knowledge, I could be wrong, is not a cult member. He's a self-aggrandizing buffoon. No doubt about it. He's a dictator. He's an autocrat. He believes himself a living god. But to the best of my ability, he's not ritually killing people. The people we have in the West are worse. Significantly worse. Let's take another look at another TikTok video.
Trudeau, in the early, I guess...
Sorry, we've seen that one already.
I have been trying not to talk about this, but recent photos revealed have changed my mind. So down the rabbit hole we go. Trudeau worked not far from the Picton farm and left shortly before the bust, but not for what you think. While there was talk of him connected to the farm, there was also a secondary, much more persistent rumor of him having an affair with a student. Trudeau taught French and drama, but yearbook pictures show him more like a student. In his zealous antics, this is also where the Aladdin cosplay incident happened. There's only one actual photo of Trudeau teaching in 2000, wearing a Scottish kilt, seated to students on the floor. He said he was a math teacher, but there's just no evidence of it. Now, the affair with the student was why he left for a much lower paying position. She was 12 when it started, and 14 when the father caught them. They signed a $2.5 million NDA agreement. Apparently, she was the daughter of a wealthy Canadian businessman who valued money over his daughter's integrity. So that makes sense. What doesn't make sense is how these pictures haven't resurfaced till now. The lower left is her when she was 12, and the lower right is apparently her when she was 14. But notice how much she looks like his current wife, Sophie. For someone who's built his political career on the fact that he was a teacher, this doesn't look good.
You see how ugly it is? And that fucking twink Trudeau is calling out goon squad police to crack people's heads at the trucker protest to force them to get the injection. Now, I want you to understand what I mean when I talk about this has gone institutional now, that this cult has taken over our institutions. The pandemic and the remedy to the pandemic, which was the medical regiment, is one giant mass ritual. Okay? So if you wanted to start making a card catalog of all the people involved in this at the deepest level, look at all the Pfizer executives at the top. Okay? Look at the health administrators. And time again, you find these freaky people involved in sex conversion, pedophilia, this whole Kabbalistic Aquarian Age bullshit. It all comes from the Kabbalah. All started 400 years ago. I explain it all in The Light of Darkness. And you need to know these things. You need to know what's going on here, because if you don't, you could find yourself in a lot of trouble. Let's take a look at this.
I have been trying not to talk about this, but recent photos...
Oh, we've seen that already.
Hey everyone, I wanted to give...
I think I've done everything.
Trudeau,
Yeah, I've done everything for today. So all of these rumors are true. We in the West are controlled by a death cult, a satanic cult that is ultimately itself controlled by extraterrestrials. Even if various members in the cult think they're worshiping the devil or Lucifer, they're not. How do I know these things? Let's just say I get by with a little help from my friends. So we'll continue on with the human devil tomorrow. This is the most harrowing part of the book, The Devil in Us. I suggest you read the book, because in the book I'm able to circumscribe these very negative things with a more loving story and put them in a spiritual context that doesn't make them as frightening. Okay? They're just not as frightening. Gaza is a ritual. That is ritual killing. Ukraine is a ritual. That is ritual killing. Zelensky and NATO are offering up all those Ukrainians to their dark god. And they equitize the blood for magical power. I know. Sounds completely crazy. Completely nutty. But it's true. They work in the currency of blood. And blood is a spiritual currency. This is the human devil. This is what we live with. If you can stomach this and you can stay with me, we're going to go through some more stuff. We're going to do the Mother of Darkness Castle in Belgium. We're going to do the Dutroux case. I'll talk a little bit about Jimmy Savile, because these are all cult members. Okay? They're all cult members. A lot of the serial killers are programmed. I'm not sure if Pickton was or not. Well, there's more stuff coming out about Pickton. So his sister was on the board of SNC Lavalin, which is a huge Quebec construction firm that was spared criminal charges in an outright scandal that should have seen the CEO and top executives go to jail for years. And they were spared a jail sentence. And Pickton's sister is on the board of directors of SNC Lavalin, or she was at the time of the scandal. You can't make this stuff up. There's no such thing as coincidence, folks. Remember the line from the movie The Counselor, where Brad Pitt is talking about the cartel, and the lawyer who's trying to say, look, this mix-up is just a coincidence. And Brad Pitt says, yeah, counselor, they don't believe in coincidences. They've heard of them. They've just never seen one. That's enough for tonight. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.